why the Wisconsin Badgers absolutely cannot have any more classes like that 2023 class.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fam? I'm your host, Ryan Harris, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. This is Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. New customers with a $5 bet get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's over at FanDuel.com to get started. Today, we're talking about that disastrous 2023 football class and why it impacts the program so much and why it continues to hurt the program. We're going to talk a little bit about portal needs as more Wisconsin Badgers have entered the portal. What does that mean? What does that maybe say about the coaching staff? And we're also going to talk about some reasons for optimism, because there are some. There are, truly. All right, but let's start with that 2023 class. It's a disaster. This is an unmitigated disaster, the 2023 class. The 23 class in the football side is a little unique. That's the class that Paul Chryst and his staff started, and then it was kind of held together with bailing wire with Jim Leonard as he became the interim coach after Paul Chryst was let go. And then it's the class that Luke Fickell inherited, right? So it's a class that it has fingerprints from a lot of different people. There's a transition there, so you can expect it to be a little rougher. This is a class that has blame and credit from all three of those guys, but it's a disaster. You look at the players that have left. That class signed about 15 guys. You've already lost Cole LaCrue, Justin Taylor, Jordan Mayer, Nate White, Jace Arnold, AJ Tisdale, Amari Snowden, Jonas Tecluna, Trech Kahuna, Braden Moore. You've lost 10 guys from that class. There's a very realistic chance the only above average Big Ten starter from that class you're going to get is Christian Allegro. One out of 15. I believe it was a class of 15. It was a smaller class. That's the disaster. That's an absolute disaster. There's still a couple guys on the roster. Tucker Ashcraft is from that class. I like Tucker Ashcraft. I think he profiles as a solid number two, kind of an inline tight end who can do a lot of dirty work, who can catch some passes across the middle. I like Tucker Ashcraft. I think there's a solid, reliable tight end there. Tyler Jancy is from that 2023 class. I like him. Hard-nosed inside linebacker, pretty athletic coming out of Illinois. I like him as well. But even if you add those guys in, you're talking three guys in a class. And there's a few other pieces here and there, but that class has been wildly disappointing. You've seen all the DBs from that class leave. You've seen Trech Kahuna leave. You've seen the quarterback leave. You've seen the edge rusher, Jordan Mayer, leave. Nate White is left. And what that does is it creates a vacuum of talent at the top. The impact there means now you got to go in the portal. Those players next year, right, they should be redshirt sophomores. Those players should be juniors. Those should start to be the guys that are in your two deep, that are taking up the mantle, the leadership in the program. Those should be the players that are starting to really fill in as the established stars and starters of the team. They're all gone. All of them. All those building block pieces. That every recruiting class is a foundation. Every single class that you bring in is meant to be a foundation for 3 to 4 years down the road. That's what they're meant to be. You've just removed an entire foundation of the program. Entirely. So that's why you got to go in the portal more aggressively. If you fail, and this is why when people say they talk about, well, high school recruiting doesn't matter anymore because of the portal. No, high school recruiting matters because if you don't nail it, then you have to go to the portal. The portal exists to fill in gaps. The portal exists to put a bandage over a wound. The portal does not exist to build foundations of classes. That's where the high school recruiting comes into play. That's why it's such a failure. That's why it's such a disaster. If you have a washout class, if you have a class that gives you nothing, that just means you're going to have to go to the portal to fill a bunch more. You're going to have to go to the portal to fill a ton more needs. And that's just not realistic. We've seen it. How many players have come into the portal that you can't hit on? You can't hit on them all because you don't have time to vet them. You don't have time to understand what they're going to be like under pressure. You don't have time to understand what they're going to be like as a teammate. You don't have time to fully vet their practice habits. You don't have time to do all that relationship building that you do in high school. Do you know how long these relationships are built at the high school recruiting level? They start recruiting these kids as sophomores. They start recruiting as juniors. They get to know the coaches, the families, multiple visits, conversations weekly. They know the parents, other family members. They talk to the training staff. They bring them into multiple game day visits. They establish these long relationships with these players that it's still not a guarantee. Like we've seen that. There's no guarantees in recruiting, whether it's a 5-star or a 0-star. 0 stars can become Matt Henningsen. 5 stars can become I mean, Logan Brown, although he did kind of turn around. But my point is, there's no guarantees, but the longer relationship you have and the more time you have to build that relationship, the better the chance that you're going to hit on that player. And in the portal, you just can't do that, right? The portal is, that game Hungry Hungry Hippos where all the marbles get dumped in the middle and everybody just starts hitting and they grab as many marbles as they can, but you don't have time to inspect the marbles. There's no opportunity there to understand what you're actually getting. You're just grabbing. Now, there is more due diligence put into the portal than Hungry Hungry Hippos. Make no mistake. The Badgers are already, and every other team, they're already vetting rosters, already looking at players that they think are in the portal. There's more background research than Hungry Hippos, but it's kind of that scenario where you have to act fast. And because you have to act fast, you have to streamline and then also forego some of the relationship building, some of the data points that are needed. That's why you have to succeed recruiting at the high school level. You have to hit on these classes. You have to understand what you're getting, and you have to try to retain that talent when you get there, which means, again, if you lose an entire recruiting class, which is essentially what you did in 2023, and you get it, I understand it from the outside looking in. When you have a coaching transition, you're taking on as Luke Fickell players that Paul Chryst staff had built a relationship with. You're kind of shotgunning some guys you had with you at Cincinnati. But it's understandable why we lost more from that class. But even then, it's a disaster. It's one of the reasons why you look at the portal needs, which you're going to get into later, why the portal needs this offseason. It's all over the map. You need a bunch of pieces. If you hadn't whipped so heavily on that 2023 class, the needs wouldn't be as grave. They wouldn't be as serious in certain spots. And whose fault is that? It's a little bit on a lot of pieces. It's a little bit on bad luck. It's a little bit on coaching transition. Ultimately, it's on Luke Fickell. It's on Luke Fickell to fix it, that's for sure. But it's just astounding when you look at that 2023 class. And a lot of players that people were really high on, Trechka Kahuna. A lot of players that people were really, really excited about. Amari Snowden, I'm just looking at the list. Obviously, Braden Moore. Braden Moore was a 4-star kid, and I thought he looked good. Like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you they couldn't use Braden Moore. They absolutely could use Braden Moore. They absolutely could use Trechka Kahuna. These are players that are at times athletically flashed and certainly can play at the next level, and you're going to see them go to pretty good teams. Now, not everybody in this class is going to do that, but there's definitely pieces here that you would have liked to retain, and you just weren't able to. So, yeah, it's a disaster. That 2023 class is wild. And going forward, you got to understand how important the high school recruiting portion of this is. It's even people try to tell me, people try to make the argument that high school recruiting is less important because of the portal. I would argue it's way more important. It's way more important because of the portal. Because if you miss in high school, then you have to go to the portal to find pieces. And those pieces are really hard to get. So I would argue high school recruiting is more important than ever. Because if you bring the right people in, which we're going to talk about in a second, then you have the first crack at establishing that relationship with them. And I think you're more likely to keep them. Instead, if you miss at the high school level, you're going to be relying consistently on a carousel of transfer portal talent. And that's a disaster for Wisconsin. That's a disaster for anybody. You have to augment in the portal. You don't want to wholesale in the portal. So that 2023 class is a disaster. The last two, I think, are going to fare better for Wisconsin, but they're going to pay the price as a program because of that 2023 class. All right, coming up next, let's talk portal needs. How has it changed since a couple players have left? How's it changed and evolved since a couple players have left? That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. First, a quick break for our friends of the show over at Mint Mobile. Listen, we're all about saving money, right? We all want a good deal. I love a good deal as much as anybody, but I'm not going to crawl through Black Friday shopping, major sales with fights going on in the aisles to get my deals. I need it simpler. I need it easier. That's what Mint Mobile is here for, to save a few bucks. It has to be easy, no hoops, no BS, no nonsense, man. Just let me save some money. That's where Mint Mobile comes in. It is easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan. $15 a month. That's it. It really is that easy. $15 a month is like a Big Mac, y'all. That's how easy this is. The longest part of the process was the time that you have to spend breaking up with your old carrier because they're terrible. They're tough. Just switch to Mint Mobile. To get started, go to mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. There you'll see right now 3-month plans are only $15 a month, including the unlimited plan. All plans come with high-speed data, unlimited text, delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can now use your own phone on any Mint Mobile plan. Bring your contacts, your phone number, all of that. You just transfer it over and then save money. Simple as that. To get this new customer offer, a new 3-month premium wireless plan for $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. That's mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month over at mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. $45 upfront payment is required, which is equivalent to that $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower than 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. All right, let's talk portal needs, and let's talk a little bit about some of the other players that have entered. All right. What are the 3 biggest losses in the portal? And I frame this in a certain way because I want to bring up a certain point that I think we're in a bit of a panic spiral. I don't know if that's the right term. I don't know if that's an actual term, but I think we're in kind of a panic spiral where you have the loss of the rivalry games, you have the 5-7 season, you have the offensive coordinator that still hasn't been filled. You had the loss of the bowl streak, and now you have portal pieces entering. It feels like you've been hit as a Badger fan. It feels like you've been dropped to the mat, and then you've been punched and punched and punched again. And you're just like, this stinks. Context needed, y'all. Take a breath. All that stinks, by the way. I'm not here to minimize any of that. Like this was not a good season. But context for the portal. Every team is losing players right now. Every team has players declaring that they're intending to enter the portal. Nebraska is just as many as Wisconsin. So Wisconsin is not unique or alone in this. The other thing I'd say, how many of these players are actually big losses? Again, I've told you on here, Braden Moore is a guy you would want back. Tretch Cagoon is the guy you would want back. James Thompson Jr. is a guy you would want back. James Thompson Jr. also didn't play last year. Kurt Neal was a mediocre defense lineman. It is what it is. It's okay to call it what it is. We called it that during the season. Tretch Cagoon, as much as I would like him back, had 25 catches last year. What are you? Jace Arnold, Snowden didn't play. So there is an element here of the numbers look a little stark. It looks a little crazy when you see all these players entering the portal. There's also not a ton of production for some of these players that you're having to replace because a lot of them haven't played much. A lot of them didn't play much. That's partially why some of these guys are going in the portal. So I would caution a little bit. Some of these players, yes, it's a lot. It doesn't mean that the sky's falling. It doesn't mean that Wisconsin is an outlier here. This is kind of college football to some degree. It just is what it is. So I would caution a little bit there. What are portal needs going forward now? Now that you've seen James Thompson Jr. go in, you've seen Tretch Cagoon, you've seen Braden Moore. The transfer portal needs and targets have changed a little bit, right? It went from you need a quarterback, some defensive line depth. You need secondary pieces now. You need a couple corners. You need a couple defensive linemen. Hank Weber is also entered the portal. You need, and there's a chance, listen, there's still a chance Ricardo Hallman could go somewhere. There's a chance Ricardo Hallman could go to the NFL. So realistically, what are you looking at in the portal? You're looking at another massive offseason of portal additions. You have to. Originally, I talked about narrow the field of focus, narrow the camera lens, focus in on a quarterback, a couple defensive linemen, let those younger pieces fill some more of the gaps. But now that you're starting to see spots that were already a little light on talent, you start to see those spots get a little lighter and lighter. Now you have to actually prioritize defense line, cornerback, quarterback again. It's probably another 15 or 20 man portal class. I think you're going to have to bring in that type of number. You're going to have to kind of do an Indiana. The one thing I talk about with the portal that I think is incredibly important, as a siren goes by me outside, I'm in the hotel, you have to do a better job of finding the culture fits. And this is, again, going back to that first segment where I think it's really, really hard to do that, but you have to do it. You have to find players somehow that are going to come in and maybe be here for a year or two, so you're not constantly cycling. A Brandon Lane would be an example. Even though he didn't play last year, that type of piece where you can get him at a position and have him for a couple years. Because now you have to establish that bridge to that 24 and 25 class. And the more pieces you can get that are sophomores, that are juniors, that you think could fit into your culture, that you can still work with and develop a little bit, the better you're going to be with those types of pieces. You're just going to have – it's going to make it easier the following season where you don't have to once again go into the turnstile. So that's the first thing. Try to find a couple multi-year guys, a couple players that can actually legitimately be the bridge to those 24 and 25 classes we really like. Those 24 and 25 classes Wisconsin has done a really good job on. If you can find a couple corners like that, a corner like that, a couple defensive linemen like that, then you can start to get out of this cycle, because this is the problem we're in right now. We're in a transfer portal cycle, and you see alumni of Wisconsin talk about it. Anthony Davis, great former running back, says we got to get out of this quarterback portal cycle. I agree. But until you get your younger guys developed, you're not going to get out of that portal cycle. So can you find a player at some of these spots that has a couple years of eligibility to kind of break that cycle? And then you can start relying more and more as you stack that talent, that 24 class, that 25 class, that 26 class. Because one thing this staff has proven is they can recruit. They can recruit at a really high level. So I think, to me, that's the biggest thing in the portal this offseason. You got to find the pieces that fit this roster and fit this culture a little bit better, and hopefully a couple guys who can be multi-year guys in the portal. You do that, and I think you get out of that cycle a little bit of constantly every year needing to bring in 15 to 20 guys. All right, we'll take one quick break there. We're going to come back and talk about 3 reasons to be optimistic, including what this staff has done so well in the recruiting trail. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show over at FanDuel. FanDuel remains your number one source for all your sports betting needs and information. They are awesome, right? Futures, parlays, teasers, spreads. It's all over there on FanDuel. FanDuel.com. Right now, new customers at $5 bet to $150 in bonus bets guaranteed with your first $5 bet if you win. It's a great opportunity. Again, they have parlays, futures, teasers, spreads, the official sportsbook of the NFL and the Locked On Podcast Network. And there where you go if you want to. NFL playoffs. Obviously, college basketball's going on. Basketball's going on. College football playoffs are coming up, which is going to be an incredible opportunity to spice up your sports weekend. Do all that over at FanDuel.com, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network and the official sportsbook of the National Football League. That's FanDuel.com. Again, fast, easy, simple. Also just safe and secure. Like, you don't have to worry about overseas craziness, which sometimes can get mixed up. Like, it's a fast, simple, easy, secure sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, let's get back into our conversation here. 3 reasons for optimism. I wanted to end with this because I've gotten so many comments about, Leah, I like the class, but I'm frustrated by it. There's three things I would point out quickly as we kind of wrap up the show. The first is they hit on important parts here. What are the biggest needs for this program? What are the biggest needs right now? It's quarterback, defensive line. They hit on both of these. So to be optimistic there, be happy that they were able to hit on those targeted spots of need with premium talent. I think the defensive line class is really, really good. I think the quarterback's really good. That's the first one. They hit on the spots they need to hit on. Ideally, maybe another cornerback, maybe another receiver. But they got the offensive line class. They got the defensive line class. They're rebuilding the trenches. They hit the quarterback, and they got some pass rushers at the edge. All these things are like the literal biggest needs of this program. They went and found all of it in the portal. That's a really, really good, exciting thing. The second thing is, if they're able to continue landing talent like this, even if as fans you're struggling to see their vision, even if as fans you're struggling to buy into what Luke Fickell has done, and that's perfectly acceptable, 100%. But they're not struggling to sell it to the talent. And that's a really important distinction. They're still selling it to the talent, and they're getting the talent to buy into what they're doing. And as long as they keep doing that, there's a chance this thing works, right? When the talent pipeline starts drying up and they stop being able to sell it to the talent, I think that's when you have to start wondering if this thing is going belly up. But at this point, they haven't had that issue. As much as you're frustrated as a fan, they got Carter Smith and Jalen Williams to flip really close to signing day. At the end of this season, they're still selling that vision, and they're still selling it to really premium high-level talent. I think that's the second thing as a Badger fan you got to be excited about. And the last one is, just imagine if this thing turns around. If they're able to recruit at this level when they're still building, when they don't have a signature win, when they're struggling to put that on-field product, when there's some fan angst, if this thing turns around, and I had a guy at a national recruiting service, he texted me. He told me this recruiting staff at Wisconsin is really, really good. Imagine what they can do if this thing turns around. It's a good point. It's something to think about. If this program and Luke Fickell can turn this around, imagine how good this recruiting could get. It could take another step up, and then you start building success that builds onto itself. Again, he has to prove it. They have to develop this young talent. Both of those things haven't happened yet. They may not happen, but the first step is getting the talent. It's incredibly important to continue recruiting at that level. And then you just have to develop and retain it. Not guarantees, but you can't develop or retain if you don't get the talent in the first place. So, again, I understand the frustration. I really do. I'm not here to try to paint over everything and say it's perfect. But there are things looking at the recruiting and from the fact that they're hitting on the spots they need to hit spots that are traditionally difficult for Wisconsin to hit on. They are still selling that vision to recruits. And quite frankly, if it turns around, this recruiting could even take another step up because then they can start selling the success on the field. So this has been Locked On Badgers. Really, really do appreciate it from the hotel today. But go check out Locked On Big Ten when you're done here. Get all the latest news and stories from the Big Ten Network over on the Big Ten channel. Appreciate everybody listening. A ton more content coming up this week on Wisconsin, and we will talk later.